Well, hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Mann, and I'm joining Matt Mace tonight from Bloomfield Leisure Services, and I represent the Wittenberry Land Trust. And I want to welcome back Jenny Apple, who was here last month talking about eagles. And if you missed her great lecture last month, go to www.wittenberrylandtrust.org, and you can scroll to the bottom of our website page and click on Watch on YouTube. And all our videos from the Nature Lecture series are available there for you to see. And you'll see Jenny's lecture. It was really great. And this week, or this month actually, we're happy to receive Jenny again. I want to tell you just a little bit about her if you weren't at our last month's webinar. So Jenny is a communications professional. She hikes, she climbs, she kayaks, she skis. She pokes her way through the outdoors with a passion for all things natural. And she also volunteers for the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP, as a certified master wildlife conservationalist. And she serves on the boards of the Farmington River Watershed Association and Friends of Connecticut State Parks, just to name a few. So I hope that you will welcome Jenny tonight. And I also want to remind you that the first day of spring, March 20th, is only 18 days away. So next month, April 6th, Wednesday at 6 p.m., we'll learn all about the importance of honeybees from Mark Creighton. And he's the state apiary inspector at the Connecticut Agricultural Experimental Station. And you can find out more information about him if you register. And again, remember, you can register either at Leisure Services or the Wittenberry Land Trust. So I'm going to say, without further ado, let's turn it over to Jenny Apple.
Hey, thank you, Sharon. Well, thanks again for having me back. I love to talk to people about wildlife species in our state. I'm sure if you're here, you know how important all these species are and how important our environment is. So the best thing we can do is learn about these species and learn about their value. And that's why I'm here. I've learned to become very familiar with beavers on different waterways. I'm a great hiker, but when the summer comes, I don't like ticks and I don't like the heat, even though I grew up in Texas. So I take to the waterways, and that's one of the best places to be able to see beavers personally. If you do have marshes in your area, which I know you do, those are good places to go towards evening. Just get one of your sling chairs, sit down, have a little dinner and wait and watch, because about an hour before dark, the beavers will start coming out. They don't really build their dams until dark, but you will see them out. So anyway, again, I want to give a thanks to Matt and Sharon. I think it's a great combination to have your leisure services in Bloomfield and the Wittenberry Land Trust get together and have these great programs. Not patting myself on the back, but they have some other great programs. So I do want to emphasize the importance of land trusts, friends groups. These groups help supplement the state, but they also help protect our lands that maybe the state aren't interested in buying. So very important land trusts. So you're it's very lucky that you have one in Bloomfield. My town of Barkhamsted is 65% MDC property and state forest. So there's not a lot of land to grab there. It's mostly privately owned aside from that. So anyway, enough about that, and I'll talk about the beavers, and at the please type your questions in and we'll be able to answer them at the end. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. And I'm just going to disappear myself because you need to see the beavers, not me. So. Okay, I call this Beaver Matters because beavers matter to me, they matter to you, and they matter to everybody. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the conflicts that there are between beavers and humans, and hopefully you'll enjoy this presentation.
Jenny, can I just ask you one question? Yep. If Matt can hear me, can he make it so someone who's hearing impaired can see the writing at the bottom?
Oh, of course, yes,
Thank
please.
you. If Matt, you hear that, can you make that possible?
I did. Let me look and see if I have that capability.
Okay.
I'll
Sorry,
wait.
I didn't mean to
Oh.
interrupt you, Jenny.
Oh, no problem. I want everybody to be able to. This is a beaver I took a photo of from my canoe. I do have a kayak, but I prefer canoes. I have a 16-pound, 12-foot long canoe, and it allows me to carry it even though I'm getting up there in age, but it allows me to go to places I couldn't go otherwise with a heavier boat.
I'm sorry, Jenny, I didn't mean to interrupt. I do not see an ability to get closed captions up on there for as an option. If somebody knows of an option and wants to send that through the Q&A, I mean, I can give that a try. But at this point, unfortunately, I don't see an option for that.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. If this person wants to email me, get in touch with Matt, and I can send you all, you know, a kind of a little summary of what I talked about. I'd be happy to do that. Or I think PowerPoints are hard to send, but I can send you the text. Okay, here we go. Okay, here's another. This is the basic profile of a beaver swimming. You don't see the long tail. I didn't get it. You know, sometimes when you're in a boat, you got to shoot your photos quickly, but we do have the tail showing later. So the North America beaver descended from a mighty big rodent. Today's beavers are descended from the large bear-side beavers of the Pleistocene epoch, as you can see here. Fossil records date back some 1.5 million years ago, and they have lived as recently as 12,000 years ago. Glad I didn't run into them in the river. The giant beavers weighed up to 500 pounds, and they had incisors 6 inches long. Really interesting, and I did see this. In 2013, a giant fossil, beaver fossil, was discovered in Chicago's Wicker Park, and it's since been placed in their Natural History Museum there. So very interesting stuff when you can see fossils like that. The North American beaver, I can kind of say this Latin word. I took 5 years of Latin, but it wasn't very good at pronouncing it. Becaster canadensis. They are distributed throughout most of the forested regions of North America, from Alaska, Canada to northern Mexico, Nevada, and northern Florida. They're found throughout Connecticut. They inhabit rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, marshes. Sometimes, occasionally, they'll be on lakes and other wetland sites. The areas have to prove adequate food and water depth so beavers can survive under the ice during winter. Large lakes like Bantam Lake or Warramog, some of those really large lakes, are prone to wave action. Fast-moving streams in areas with highly fluctuating water levels are also generally unsuitable for beavers. Not saying impossible, but in Connecticut, historical records indicate that a pair of beavers was released in Union in 1914. There were sporadic releases in the late 20s and early 30s, and that reestablished isolated populations, mainly in northwestern Connecticut and northeastern Connecticut, which is where traditionally the large populations of our fur-bearing mammals are. Beavers also began moving to Connecticut from New York and Massachusetts, where there were pretty active restoration efforts. By the 50s, the small population of beavers present in the state, which we estimate at 20 colonies, which is what their family group is called, began causing problems for landowners. So in 1961, in response to the growing number of complaints and to manage the beaver population as a renewable natural resource, a regular trapping season was initiated. These are in December and January. Today, the Connecticut beaver population is very abundant, and lodges and dams are frequently seen on our waterways. The population, although as I've told you in previous talks, you know, it's hard to keep an accurate count, but I think the biologists get within a pretty good degree of it. We estimate about 10,000. In fact, there are more beavers in the state presently than at any other time in the last 300 years, which is a testament to the improving environment. They exist today in a landscape, though, that's very different from what they had in pre-colonial times. They share their habitat here in Connecticut with over 3.5 million people on 3.2 million acres of land that is mostly dominated by residential, commercial, and industrial development. But so they are survivors. Strong and steady enough to mold the earth with their lavers. According to Native American beliefs, giant beavers, like the ones we just saw, fetched the mud with which the earth was built. So a very powerful symbol for Native Americans. It's not such an outlandish idea, I don't think, when you consider that beavers in all of their farms have lived on this continent for over 1 million years, long enough to modify the majority of the watersheds in North America. In fact, I was told by a beaver expert that we owe much of our tillable land to their efforts. If you dig down in any farmer's field, you're likely to find silt that long ago accumulated in the stillness of an ancient beaver pond. In building these dams, beavers are the only species besides humans that create their own habitat, who can affect change over large habitat by building structures. So very powerful animal. The beaver provided everything perfectly well for Native Americans. It gave them kettles, hatchets, swords, knives, bread. In fact, it provides everything, and Native Americans said in 1634. That's a beaver quiver on the left there. I would have never thought of making one out of a quiver, but they did repurpose beavers for all kinds of things. They did rely on them heavily for food, medicine, tools, and clothing. They were also bartered and exchanged between different Native American groups, even before European traders arrived. They took them year-round as needed, using snares, spears, deadfalls, and clubs, and by draining the ponds. In a culture where all animals were respected for both their practical and spiritual values, the beaver was honored, especially as a source of guidance on family matters, and we'll talk about that later. The beavers, as I said, native to Canada, United States, and northern Mexico. It is found throughout North America, but you can see it's not in parts of Florida and parts of the, the California, Nevada area, not suitable habitat. They have been introduced in many other countries around the world. In fact, England's beavers are back after an absence of 400 years. Some welcome that, some don't. The beaver has always been kind of controversial. So these show you the current beaver range. The black dots are historical trading posts. The red is primary habitat, secondary and tertiary. You see Connecticut is involved in that. There were 60 to 100 million beaver in North America prior to the arrival of Europeans. Today, there are about 6 to 12 million, 1/6 of the original population. Again, it's estimated that we have around 10,000 here in Connecticut, which is a healthy population for our size. The high value placed on beaver pelts during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries is what led to the near extirpation. And I don't love that word, but it means driving out of, it doesn't mean extinct, of the animal from North America. Beaver pelts were used in winter clothing such as jackets and boots, but the primary use for pelts was the construction of felted hats in Europe and Russia. From the 1600s through the 1800s, felt was made from the hairs of the undercoat and shaped into a wide range of popular hat styles. And here you can see them right here. For 2 centuries after the first colonists arrived, beaver pelts were an important medium of exchange in North America. In fact, beaver pelts basically financed that in our wood, our forest, the colonists when they came here in North America. But it also led to the abuse of North American native Indians, who the colonists asked to trap the pelts, the beavers, and the commercial trade in fur berries, especially the beavers, helped, as I said, drive economic. Beaver pelts were in great demand in Europe for, again, the hats, the coats, everything. So when the Hudson Bay Company monopolized the fur trade using Native Americans and giving them a pittance for the fur, the medium of exchange was the made beaver, which are those coins on the bottom right. The worth of one made beaver pelt harvested in the winter months. In 1795, one of these coins, one made beaver could buy you a sword blade, 4 made beavers could buy a gallon of brandy, and 6 would buy you boots. So we see where the priority was there. Unlike the Native Americans, who only would take as many animals as they needed for survival, to eat or to clothe themselves, to keep warm, the colonists just pretty much came in and shot everything and trapped everything and cut all our forests down and sent a lot of the wood to Europe for beams for ships and furniture. So quickly, a lot of the animals were gone, a lot of the wood was gone, and a lot of the habitat for animals was gone. Between 1652 and 1657, a Springfield fur trader, John Pynchon, and you know that's a very famous name in the colonies, sold 8,992 beaver pelts from the Connecticut River drainage, which would be up there around Springfield. These furs did allow debts to be paid by the colonists. In fact, most of the country was explored and mapped by trappers and voyagers who traveled westward into unsettled territory in search of beaver pelts. Later on, settlers would follow these beaver trapper travel routes as they moved west to settle new lands for farming. So the beaver has had a big impact, whether alive or dead, on our society for a long time. So the loss of habitat, the over-trapping and harvesting of beavers pretty much led to their decimation, particularly here in New England. By the mid-1800s, beavers no longer existed in Connecticut and most of the northeastern United States. This is an interesting quote by a Dutch lawyer and landowner. "The beaver is the main reason for the initial settlement of this fine country by Europeans. The fur is made into the best hats that are worn throughout Europe." The beaver was sought out of because of its fur. It consists of very long, coarse guard hairs that are about 10 times the diameter of their soft, wavy, short underfur. Those guard hairs on the top overlay the luxurious underfur, and they are the longest, 2 to 2.5 inches long, and most dense along the back. But the underfur also attains its greatest length, up to about 1.2 inches on the back. Their colors can range from a dark gray to a light chestnut in color. A lot of our beavers are pretty much the color of this one. They sometimes have a lightning around their face. The slaughter of beavers transfigured our waterways here in North America. In a healthy beaver-rich creek, dams slow down water flow, capture sediment, and counteract erosion. But after beavers and what I call their dam speed bumps disappeared, streams eroded into their beds and cut deep gullies in a process called incision. So if you see some areas with very high cliffs and just a cut through area, it's either was a mill or it possibly was where beavers were once and were gone. These steep-sided, straight-jacketed streams lost the ability to spill onto their floodplains and recharge aquifers. So some of those streams also dried up altogether, which had a huge impact on everything, farming and everything in our lives here. This is pretty incredible to me, and I always laugh because, you know, you're always told that eagles have 7,200 feathers and beavers have up to 23,000 hairs, and I'm wondering who sits and counts these things and how is it accurate? But anyway, that's science, I guess. So they have 23, some of the thickest fur in the animal world. And as I said, it's the densest and warmest and most waterproof of all. They have as many hairs in an area smaller than a dime than we have on our heads. So bald guys, I guess you could wish you'd come back as a beaver, but anyway, no offense. With approximately 12,000 to 23,000 hairs per square centimeter, they have more hair per skin area than the nutria in South America, which has many more, and less than the river otter, which has 25,000 to 51,000. And if you'll see the river otter later, they have very fine hair compared to the beaver, but I guess that packs in a lot more. So again, trapping plus habitat loss from the clearing of forest lands did lead to the diminish of beaver populations in the US to less than 100,000 by the 20th century. Today, the Queen's Guard at Buckingham Palace still wear hats made out of beaver, and the lush felt cowboy hats evolving from the original Stetsons are made of beaver fur. I know that because I was a cowgirl once. Anyway, a friend of mine, that upper photo from the left, he has a camera trap on this beaver dam, and he's gotten some great photos. So anyway, I want to tell you one of the values of beavers in the animal kingdom and other places. There's something called a keystone species. Beavers are a keystone species, which means they have a disproportionately large effect on their environment relative to their abundance. Their role is similar to the top block in an arch. If you pull that block out, the entire structure crumbles. Again, beavers play a critical role in the watersheds of North America by maintaining the structure of the surrounding ecological community. Their presence in watersheds affects not only the types and numbers of many terrestrial and aquatic plants and animal species, but it also maintains the change over time of channel form and the hydrology and health of watersheds. The beavers are also called an ecosystem engineer, and that's an organism, again, that creates, changes, or destroys a habitat. There's perhaps no clearer example, I don't think, of a keystone engineer than the beaver. Again, the rivers rely on beavers to take down older dead trees along the riverbanks and use for their dams. And this allows new, healthier trees to grow in abundance. The dams divert water in rivers. They create wetlands that allow a variety of animals and plants to thrive. By removing these shoreline trees, they let in a flood of sunlight that encourages more palatable shrubs and saplings, such as aspen, birches, and willows, their favorite trees. By removing that overstory competitors, they make way for trees that have been waiting in the understory for a long time. By releasing them for growth, they actually accelerate the aging process of a forest around the edges of ponds. So it does a lot more than we think. These are some pictures I took from my canoe of species that benefit from beaver marshes. Many trout and salmon populations rely on beaver dams to sort sediment and regulate water flow. Without the beavers to build the dams, populations of these fish would decline rapidly. Fish are food for a lot of carnivores and omnivores. Beavers create these wetlands and where there'll be many species of frogs and birds that live exclusively in wetlands. These species would have no home otherwise. Bird eggs, circle of life, are food for reptiles and rodents, and amphibians feed on a whole host of creatures ranging from trout to bass to frogs to other things. Aquatic plants feed just about every herbivore native to wetlands. So again, they also provide great habitat for minks, muskrats, bats forage in around beaver ponds because there's a lot of healthy insects there. And I could just go on: salamanders, frogs, turtles, herons, grebes, all kinds of ducks, kingfishers, even bald eagles like this stern one that I took a picture of on the west branch of the Farmington River rely quite heavily on beaver created habitats. This is what I call the angry beaver. I came around the corner on the Bantam River in Litchfield, and he was up on the shore and he'd already been in the mud. He was pretty muddy, and he hissed at me. I didn't even know he was there as I came around. The beaver is a rodent like rats, mice, and squirrels, but it is North America's largest rodent. They can weigh between 30 and 65 pounds. I mean, they get pretty darn big and are typically 24 to 36 inches long, not including the tail, which can be up to 18 inches. They are semi-aquatic rodents that live in and around water, and their bodies are uniquely suited to the environment that they inhabit. This heavily bodied animal has powerful muscles and short legs, and while slow moving on land, they're pretty funny to watch when they move. It is well adapted for life in their semi-aquatic environment. On land, they typically walk on all four legs, but if they carry mud or sticks, they may hold the materials in their front paws and walk kind of awkwardly upright. They can live 10 to 15 years in the wild. There have been reports of wild beavers living to 20. In captivity, one beaver lived to be 25 years old. So they are survivors and pretty hardy animals. Here's some photos. They're, as I said, they're uniquely adaptable and distinctive among animals. Their soft pelts range in color from nearly black to brown, reddish brown to blonde. Again, their underfur has long, shiny guard hairs. When a beaver dives, air bubbles are trapped beneath the underfur next to the beaver's skin, and this provides them with tremendous insulating qualities, and that allows the beaver to survive in icy waters. One of the 5 toenails on its hind feet is split, and it is used by the beaver to assist in their fastidious grooming habits of their fur. Their hind legs are webbed for swimming, and they have a flat, almost hairless tail, about 12 to 16 inches long. They use that as a rudder to navigate the water and to balance upon as they stand on their hind legs, gnawing on trees and various woody plants. And no, they don't use it to pack mud. They use it for balance. Again, while generally kind of clumsy on land, they are incredibly graceful and elusive in water. Again, they use those webbed feet to propel themselves and their tail to steer. So quite remarkable animals. Whenever we're talking about an animal species, we always talk about their tracks and their scat, which is what animal poop is called. A friend of mine sent me this photo because I have gotten some beaver tracks, but not as good as these. And he only had his lighter to, and that's a pretty old lighter, to show you size. But whenever you're trying to figure out what animal went there, although beaver tracks are pretty distinctive, always put down something to measure distance. So guess what? Their scat looks like sawdust. Why? Because they eat a lot of wood, but they also eat plants in the summer. So here's 2 examples of their scat. So one of the beaver's most distinguishing and identifiable feature is its broad, flat, scaly tail. It's used for a prop when cutting trees and when walking on the hind legs while carrying materials in their forelimbs. It's a rudder during swimming, as I said, and an alarm by slapping the water surface, and a fat reserve for lean winter months. It also serves in the winter as a heat exchange organ that reduces heat loss from 25% in the summer to 2% in the winter. So very, very important. As a kayaker or a canoeist, I always try to get the perfect slap, and it's very hard because you don't know exactly when they're going to slap this tail. And this was with a really long lens. That's why it's out of focus, but you can see that big tail about to slap. They're just slapped. So they will warn you. It looks like it was close. I don't go close to them. I don't want to invade an animal's space, but I have an inferior long lens that does work sometimes. So if a beaver is threatened, it will slap its tail on the surface to alert family members of potential danger and to startle predators such as bears, bobcats, or otters. They have a keen sense of smell, which also helps them find food sources and identify family members and avoid predators. So here's a few more slaps. You can see the beaver about to submerge as it slaps its tail there. So a friend of mine wrote this book, Camera Trapping Guide, and I would encourage you to get this book. I don't get any kickbacks, don't worry, but it's about using camera traps, either a game cam or even a game cam with a DSLR camera, to see what moves around at night and day around your property. It's very fun. The regular game cams are pretty reasonably priced now, and it's just really fun to see what comes around. But she is a PhD, and she goes all over the place and puts out these camera traps, which include a DSLR camera, and gets great photos. And she's generous enough to let me use them. So a lot of animals climb over beaver lodges, not just in the winter, but all the time. And here you see a beautiful bobcat. In Janet's book, she also has a field guide to a lot of these animals and tracks and stuff. So it's a very valuable book. Beavers are prey animals, so their eyes are widely spaced to help give them a large field of vision. They use their sense of smell to detect predators, as I say. Select paddleable hardwoods and locate other beaver via mud scent mounds, which I'll show you some pictures of soon. It's well known that their lodges are important resources for other species. Some birds use them as nesting platforms. There's a young bear cub, and some mammals den inside them. They do allow muskrats to sleep with them in the winter, which is kind of interesting. But one little known fact is that beaver lodges are also diving platforms for mischievous little black bears. So it's climbing up there. You can see the mother on the right. And then here's the little one about to jump off. So pretty interesting and nice capture. There's a bear at nighttime coming across the lodge. There's a beaver at its lodge getting ready to pack it. And in the fall, in the autumn, they will build their dams higher to try to back up the water and make it high enough so they don't get frozen in their lodges. But they'll also add a lot of mud and other debris to their lodges so they don't have predators that can get in. As you can see on the above that beaver's head, you'll see this kind of debris in the water, and that's called a cache. And they'll take saplings and put them alongside their lodge. And during the winter, they'll come out of the tunnels that are underneath the ice and pull the saplings through so they'll have available food. I found one goose nest on a beaver lodge one spring, so pretty interesting. Teeth are the business tool of the beaver. Their cartoonish signature top and bottom incisors file each other down into sharp, chisel-like tools and make short work of many logs and trees. They can be up to an inch long. The orange color comes from their diet, which is structurally fortified with iron, and it gives them the most powerful and durable teeth in the animal kingdom. Their teeth, though, never stop growing, so they have to constantly file them down by gnawing on trees and grinding their teeth together. I guess they wouldn't make very good bed mates, that grinding. Anyway, the orange enamel I said on the front it does contain iron, and it wears slower than the white dentin on the back side of the teeth. And that allows the beaver to self-sharpen as it chews through wood. They are the only North American animal to fell large trees, except, of course, humans. The trees they cut on average are from 7 to 0.8 inches to 53.5 inches. So they can go through a lot, although I've seen them try to fell much bigger trees. This is their skull, very powerful. They're massive when compared to those of other mammals of similar length. They have massive skulls that include those two incisor teeth. The molars are used to crush and grind plant material. They do eat a lot of plant material in the summer. The deep groove houses a large muscle for closing the lower mandible, and their jaw joint is high on the skull above the teeth, and that helps them have a very strong bite. If you know a beaver's in a pond, don't let your dog swim there because beavers can be pretty nasty to dogs. A less rugged skull would be unable to withstand the physical stress and strain of the jaw muscle contractions that have to have enough strength to cut hardwood such as oak. My friend Cheryl Anderson has taken some great photos. She's got one of those lenses I'd love to have, but never will. But anyway, she's also just a great nature photographer, and I'm very grateful that she lets me use her images. So here you can see they gnaw trees in a circular pattern around the trunks. The stumps are pointed and scarred with broad, I'm going to go to this one, broad tooth marks. Some marks might be higher up, indicating the work was done, guess when? In the winter. Some people say, how can you say that's a beaver? I said, well, because there was a lot of snow. They were standing on snow. Branches used to build their lodges will often have the bark peeled off. They can cut over 200 trees per year, each beaver, and consume 2 pounds of wood per day. Pretty amazing. In 10 minutes, they can fell a 3-inch diameter tree, and they've been known to labor for hours over a record 60-inch circumference tree. Back to these guys. Again, when they strip those sticks, they're getting cambium, which is a really valuable food source and vitamin for them. And then they bring them over to the dam, and I'll show you how they build those later. So again, here's typical on the right is what a beaver gnaw looks like. And as you see, pretty close to a marsh. I want to show you this. At Christmas, I was in Oklahoma, and this is on the Arkansas River. I blew these up and they're a little blurry, but those are my great nephews who I love dearly, and they love to do nature stuff with me when I'm there. Those are beaver tail drags in the ground there, those impressions. So the beaver was going around this tree, gnawing it, and that was the tail as it dragged along. And my nephews were very excited to see that. So you can see my nephew Brody pointing at the tail drags, and you can see the tree there as it was gnawed. So pretty impressive. The rancher that owns this property wasn't very happy that this tree was gnawed down in an area where he brings hunters to gather and have picnics, because it gets pretty hot there. But anyway, I said that's just the way it goes. So here's a beaver. It's hard to hear, but this is a beaver I saw, and I was pretty far away, and it's right kind of in the middle, and you'll watch it and you can hear it gnawing, and then it'll move over to the right. So I'm going to play it for you. Taking a little chew there. Now it moves along. Kind of looks at me as I think it's doing its business there. So anyway, I was happy to get that, even though I was shooting it through the sticks, but that show you some of what they do. A beaver's sensory orifices are uniquely adapted for its semi-aquatic existence. They can see underwater. They have 3 sets of eyelids. The third is called a nictitating membrane, and it basically is an opaque covering over their eyes to keep debris out and allows them to retain their vision while underwater. They have valves that automatically close in their ears and nose, which keeps the water from going in. And this I've never seen a picture of, but they have fur-lined lips that seal behind their teeth to prevent drowning during underwater stick grasp. So I can't even imagine that. I wish I could see a picture of it someday. I might, but I'm not getting the photo. But anyway, with that nictitating membrane, it's like having built-in goggles for your eyes. Despite this, they do have very poor eyesight, but they do make up for that. They have excellent hearing and a highly developed sense of smell. Here's a typical look of a beaver. Again, I use a long lens to get this. There again, typical profile. They're kind of unmistakable, although people do mistake otters and muskrat farms sometime, and we'll talk about that later. Here they are in the water. These protections they have, the closing of the ear valves and the eyes, are built because much of the work they do require they need to be able to remain underwater for several minutes at a time. They can be underwater for 15 minutes. So sometimes if you're paddling on a small pond and they slap their tail and you're looking around to see where they are, they can emerge pretty far away. So they do hold their breath during that time, but they can hold it for up to 15 minutes. Pretty incredible. This is one going under the surface. It creates a little whirlpool. Here's one turning. Always get their eyes on you. Beavers are strictly vegetarian, and they're choosy generalists when it comes to their diet. This means they'll prefer certain types of plants above others, but they will sample and utilize a wide variety of plant materials when and where they are available. As I said earlier, aspen, cottonwood, and willow trees are their preferred food, but when available, but they will substitute birch, maple, ash, alder, and other woody plants if necessary. They eat the inner bark of the twigs, leaves, shoots, and roots. During summer, they'll often eat non-woody herbaceous plants, such as grasses, lily pads, aquatic plants, and algae. Where ponds or streams freeze during the winter, beavers will build food caches. near their lodges or burrows, which they can access under the ice. You can see on the right, there's quite a bit built there. Because they don't hibernate or migrate during winter months, they need a reliable supply of food, because most of the time that deciduous vegetation are dormant in the winter. Yuck, no fish for me, they're smelly. And then the otter says, good, that's more for me. But though they're often surrounded by them and even help juvenile coho salmon survive and thrive in their first year by providing still waters and pools, beavers do not eat fish. I'm not saying one never ever ate a fish. He might have swallowed, you know, a minnow while he was chomping down on a lily pad, who knows. But unlike Mr. and Mrs. Beaver in the Chronicles of Narnia, I'm sure of some other movies in Disney, they don't eat fish. I always like to give a little literature and suggestion of some books for people. This one is very esoteric, but very interesting. It's called Once They Were Hats. So in her book, Frances Backhouse writes about the relationship between beavers and water lilies. She visits a lake where beavers had long been absent, but were introduced. And she noted changes in the vegetation because of the beaver activity, and water lilies being one of the plants that were impacted by the presence of beavers, meaning they grew more. I was paddling one day a year or so ago in the autumn, and I came up on this. And I don't know, I thought it was really beautiful, but I got a little creeped out because I didn't know what it was. I thought it might have come from outer space, but my water biologist friend, Elisa, told me, oh, that's a lily pad tuber root. So that's what anchors the lily pads underneath the water. So I thought it was very artistic. So I thought I'd show you what it looked like. But again, during the summer, the lily pads and their stems are very important diets for beavers. Beavers do build up extra fat reserves. Again, as I said, on their tails that help them survive the winter. But these saplings you see spreading out from the lodge are very important. It's a winter disaster for a beaver colony if the water level is too low and the ice seals them into their lodge. That can lead to starvation. So they do work very busily in the fall, hoping to get the water levels up. I will say, if you come across a beaver dam, there's a lot of people on the Bantam River in Litchfield that just love going over the dam and having like a amusement park ride. But what they're doing each time is creating a break in the dam. And if they do that in the autumn, the beavers then have to spend their time patching the dam instead of building it up. So get out of your canoe, get your feet muddy and walk around, is what I say. So here's a beaver carrying a log, as you can see. Here they are getting ready to pack their lodge. The beaver lodge consists of underwater tunnels that lead up into the lodge to an elevated nesting platform that's lined with wood chips and other nesting material. Beavers are one of the most family-oriented of all animal species. They live in colonies from 2 to 8. The 8 consist of their newborn kits and their 1 to 2 year old offspring. They all share the lodge. It does have a complex architecture, as I said. There's many entrances and exits, and they have that cache is under the nest to be used as food during the winter. And they will plaster. It's fun to see in the autumn how different lodges can change as they keep plastering mud on it to hold it together and make it impenetrable to predators. I call this the double wide lodge. This is, I think, in Norfolk, Connecticut. I forget. There's a couple of lakes. York Lake has a double wide also. So these are 2. Beavers oftentimes will build what's called a bank lodge, which is right against the bank while they're preparing their lodges out in the water. Obviously, the lodge out in the water is more safe, even though a lot of their predators, I mean, bear can swim, bobcats can swim, otters can swim, do swim, but it tends to help save them a little. So these are made of sticks and mud, and again, they could be called a bank lodge. These are bank lodges right here, but as I've observed, I think these beavers live in these, so they just got them there and they felt they were the best places. So the beavers are monogamous and typically mate for life. They breed in the winter and will give birth in the spring. They produce only 1 litter per year. After reaching sexual maturity, when the subadult beaver is 2 or older, they have to disperse and find a mate and set up a new colony somewhere else. If it's a pretty big waterway, they might set up their own colony a little further away from their parents. Again, these are different types of lodges. There's another bank lodge. Here's what they look like. Very large dome piles of stick. They rise up out of the water. And as you see, they have many entrances and exits to the lodges, and the living chambers are above the water. They'll also build channels out through the marsh, through the Phragmites and other marsh grasses into the areas to go, and get some sticks and cut down trees. Baby beavers are called kits and are born in the late spring. They're fully furred when they're born, and they're just over a pound. A beaver litter can have between 1 and 9 kits, and a lot of wildlife species, animals will have a lot of offspring, and that ensures more survival of the species. These newborns can walk and swim as soon as they're born, but as they grow, the young ones stay in the lodge because there's so many predators that could prey up on the small beavers. And as you know, as parents, it's hard to keep track of all these little ones if they're running around. So until a beaver is 2 years old, they will spend their time eating, growing, and learning. They will help their parents repair the lodge and store food for the winter, but they'll stay right next to the lodge. I was happy to get this picture of 2 beavers swimming alongside each other. It's very hard to find them together. A lot of times they'll send one out by itself to just kind of see what's going on before they start their dam building in the evening. As you can see, there are 2 side by side there. It was kind of like shooting through brush, but here's their scent mounds. They will put up stacks of mud and put their scent on them. Although beavers are generally, go back to this, sociable animals. The exception is when they work. They tend to work independently, and they tend to have little contact with each other while working. So one might be working on the middle of the dam, another farther away. They do establish these scent mounds to establish territories. They mark their territories, and let me tell you, these do smell. They're very pungent castor oil with mud and leaves. Castoretum, I'm sorry, not castor oil. Many biologists call these mud pies. And again, they're mounds of mud marked with drops of their castoreum. And it's a musk-like smell that they use to communicate their presence. There are 50 different volatile substances in their castoreum, and every beaver has a unique odor or signature, sort of like our fingerprints. And guess what? Humans have used castoreum and perfume also to leave memorable messages. There may be 40 to 120 of these mounds within the home range of a beaver family. So again, if you hadn't seen a lodge yet, or you haven't seen a dam, if you see these piles of mud and they're kind of stinky, then you know there's a beaver somewhere. They will construct channels leading away from their lodges and sometimes dig them into the forest so they can harvest trees without crossing land. A lot of these will flood and get water in them, as you can see on the right. So they use their talent for digging to create these channels, especially around the lodge. So they'll have water around even when there are droughts and long winters. Here again, here's a channel that's filled up with water. So very important for the beavers. Beavers do construct dams across streams. The resulting ponds extend their access to trees, either swallowed or approached by rising waters. They're constructed of mud and plant materials dredged and hauled up from beneath the surface. They can measure only a foot high or 6 feet high. They're very complex structures, and as you see on the top right, beavers often will set vertical sticks and jam them into the bottom of the water there, and then put lattice work across the top of it to help hold the dam. It's pretty interesting. On the left, you'll see it's in the Grand Tetons. It's the largest known dam. It's 2,970 feet in length and 10 feet high. Until recent improvements in remote sensing, beaver dams were one of few animal signs that were really visible from space. So to me, that's a pretty incredible thing. Here again, you can see the construction of the dam. They lay this across until it just becomes so thick that it just holds the water. In the spring, if you go where a beaver dam has been, quite often you'll see gaps in it because of the ice melting and everything, and then they'll have to get busy. They do construct these dams. They'll carry long lengths of wood in their mouth, and they'll secure again one of those into the bottom of the stream, and with the opposite end facing into the current. And then they add the sticks and as they go, and these are caught by the longer lengths. And so very, very good engineers when it comes to that. Again, as I said, unlike in cartoons, they do not pack mud into dams with their tails, but they will sometimes walk on their hind legs with an armload of muddy debris tucked under their chin. I've yet to get a picture of that, but every time I've seen a beaver on land, it's going faster than I thought they could. This is one of the best built dams I've seen. It's up Route 8 and on the way to the Berkshires. This one holds back a lot of water and very well constructed. Here's a dam near me after the winter, so you can see the beaver has some works to do, a little cracks in their foundation there. Here's another one that's on the same stream. So this is kind of an unusual dam in one of our state forests. It did cover a road up, but the road went to nowhere, so that was okay. You can see the lodge off in the distance. This dam is not very high, but it successfully holds the water back. So there's all different kinds of dams. Here's the one I had said on the Bantam River where people just keep going over it. It is in White Memorial, if you're familiar with that place, and I wish they would put up signs because it is very destructive to the beavers in the fall. Though you're most likely to see them out at about dawn and dusk, it's rare to find them gnawing trees or building dams until night. Most of that work is done at night. This again is my friend who took those great photos of the beavers on the dams at night. This word, coprography, it means it eats its own poop for nourishment, and they're metabolic miracles. There's no other animal, human or fur-bearing, that can digest the fibrous cellulose and tough woody lignin so well. Their knack for coprography, which helps, but so too does their intestine. They have an intestine that's 6 times the length of their body. They eat 1 to 4.5 pounds per day, and it takes 60 hours for the food to pass through their systems because of that big intestine. I said, wow, somebody told me it takes 48 hours for bacon to go through our system. Imagine 60 hours for their food, that woody stuff, to pass through their system. But when it does go through their system, it spreads nutrients and other matter that over time becomes rich matter for the ecosystem. I remember one time somebody asked me, what good are black bears? I said, well, bears eat seeds and nuts, right? And there's like, yeah. I said, then they poop, right? I said, yeah, well, then they're spreading seed all over the place. So, and in my opinion, they're worth a lot more than that. But anyway, I had to have some kind of an answer. So here's some trees, typical beaver gnawed trees. So as they're gnawing these trees, they're sharpening and shortening their incisors. It's a full-time job. They gnaw down trees using those large incisors and trim off large and small branches for use as construction material and food. So here, these are big trees that were felled, but obviously they're not going to drag this giant tree, over to their lodge or their dam. So they'll gnaw on it. They'll get that cambium, that rich nutrients for their food, and they'll also take off all the branches on it to take to either their lodge or to their dam. So you can see the teeth marks over on the right. Very fun to see these. A lot of trees that they've not felled completely will have like an hourglass shape. So anyway, they do spend their whole lives cutting down trees. This is a friend of mine's son from quite a while back next to a gnawed tree. So you can see that's pretty big. Again, the dams that they build do catch water and hold it there and make their wetlands. I can't avoid cartoons sometimes. So the beaver and the lumberjack. So people say, well, can a beaver direct the tree where it falls, or do they ever get hit by trees? Well, yeah, they do sometimes get hit by trees, but there have been some beavers found underneath a felled tree. So unlike a lumberjack who generally can guide where the tree goes, the beaver really can't. Here you can see that one, they were able to get it into the water. And there again, you see those vertical sticks that they can face into the upstream to catch the water. Busy a beaver and eager beaver. These are cliches that I think are built on wood solid truth. They have been recognized as hard workers for many centuries, but it was the 20th century that brought these phrases into popularity. They find their origins in around the 40s and peaked around the mid 50s. The first eager beaver, this idiom we think happened because of the loose rhyme between eager and beaver. Some speculate that it may be related to the next idiom, busy as a beaver, which also refers to someone industrious, but it did gain big popularity during World War II among the US Armed Forces. Originally, it referred to a soldier who was excited to impress his superiors by performing duties others wouldn't like to do. And it can have a positive or a negative connotation. Sometimes people will use it to show somebody is hardworking and energetic, but other times people use it kind of snarky, in a snarky way to show that a person is trying too hard to call favor. So that's the derivation of those. So here's some noise of beavers. It's harder to do it when I'm on Zoom. So listen to them all, you'll hear them gnawing, then you'll hear them kind of making little noises, and these are different noises they make. I was supposed to go on, but I guess not. Okay, many a canoeist, fisher person, or nature enthusiast has at one time or another mistaken these three species for each other. Because Connecticut is home to all three, I thought I'd give you a few things to help you differentiate between the river otter, the beaver, and the muskrat. They are all semi-aquatic animals. The muskrat's the smallest. But trust me, they're much smaller than the beaver. Here you can see this is not to scale, obviously. The river otter is longer than the beaver, but the muskrat's nowhere near the size of the beaver. But I want you to kind of look at the tails on them all. The river otter has fur all the way on it, even down to its feet and its tail. The beaver just has that flat, hairless tail. And the muskrat has a hairless tail, but you see it's kind of very mouse-like, rat-like, skinny tail. Sometimes when they're swimming, the muskrat, the tail may be curved slightly out of the water. Sometimes it will point straight up like an antenna. Beavers, on the other hand, they look for that wide, flat tail, that body across the water, the ears sticking up. They're also much larger and rotund. Then the river otters are very sleek. They are carnivores and they do eat fish. They're in the weasel family. Their favorite food is fish. They'll also eat, though, amphibians, turtles, crayfish. One of the big differences when you're watching them in the water is that swimming river otters, you'll see just their head and neck, not the full length of the body. They're more curved. But also they do what's called porpoising, which is kind of like a dolphin when it goes along in the water. So you'll see them move like that. And they dive more frequently than the beaver or the muskrat. They're much more energetic. They're often in pairs. So you'll more likely see them in groups. We don't usually see the beaver groups together as often. So Here's a muskrat. Their tail will move back and forth to help with swimming. They're pretty small. Their body is 12 inches, their tail 9 inches. We don't generally see them side by side, but I will tell you, people are pretty bad at going back to this picture at identifying animals. And if you saw the muskrat from a great distance and the beaver, they kind of hunch the same way. And if you can't see the tail, a lot of people say, oh, that's a beaver. And then it turns out being a muskrat. So again, there's quite a huge difference in their sizes. So here's the river otter. As you can see, they can be up to 33 pounds. He's got him a nice little frog there. Their total length can be up to 5 feet. I mean, that's pretty darn long. And the females are roughly 1/3 the size of the males. It's a whole different body type. They're very long and slender. I call them athletic compared to the other two. Again, another sign is they have fur from head to foot. They are weasels, while the muskrat and beaver are rodents. Again, like many weasels, they're very energetic. You can sometimes ID an otter just because of its antics. They do play a lot, hang around with each other, and it makes them a very popular thing to photograph if you can find them. Also, guess what? They have those whiskers on their face, very bushy whiskers, so and very small ears. Again, here's the beaver. They weigh between 35 and 65 pounds. That's pretty big. The heaviest beaver on record weighed 110 pounds. I can't even imagine that. They can be 3 to 4 feet long. And when they're standing, they can be up to 1.5 feet tall. Their tail shapes are pretty thick and they're hairless, as I've shown you. So as we talk about beavers, we have to talk about the challenges and the conflicts that we have with beavers. They can create and enhance wetland wildlife habitat, but they can also cause conflicts with man and our needs and desires. The majority of these involve flooding and the killing of trees. The trees are killed either because they're chopped down, by their gnawing, or girdling, which means they just go around and around the tree and eventually it will kill it. Or the flooding can cause the root systems of trees to uproot. The trees can fall on everything you can imagine: buildings, cars, roads, driveways, fields, lawns, wells, septic systems. One of the most common complaints in Connecticut is the plugging of culverts that can cause property flooding, road and driveway damage. Again, as I said, the average beaver cuts 200 trees a year, and we have 10,000 beavers. That's a lot of trees, but Connecticut has a lot of trees. I'll never forget when my granny visited me and I was taking her back to the airport to go back to Texas. She said, "Jenny Sue, I don't care if I ever see a tree again." So anyway, but the damage can be costly. And a lot of the damage, the beaver problems are caused by our encroachment on their habitat. We can only expect that this is going to increase as land in close proximity to wetlands is developed for residential, commercial, and industrial use. I'm the chair of our Conservation Commission, which is just an advisory commission, but I would encourage you in your town to try to get on inland wetlands or Conservation Commission to help keep track and monitor, what's going to be built near different important parts of the environment in your town. The conservation commissions are mandated by the state that cities have them, but they're not elected. They're just advisory committees. Inland wetlands are elected, but to me, they're two of our most important committees to be involved with. So anyway, so flooding, tree cutting, damage to man-made structures, impacts on other natural resources, water quality, and public health issues. So this man in Massachusetts came up with the beaver deceiver, and this helps block culverts from getting all tangled up with sticks and all other kinds of debris that the beavers put there. It does work some, but not great. So it's a continuing conflict. So the solutions are varied. Results effective and ineffective. I'm sorry, I meant to change this. Most of these slides I created, but a few of them I took from a state talk, and we do not relocate beavers anymore. If a beaver causes a problem, they are trapped and euthanized. Anyway, so conflict resolution, if you're in a condo area or your home is getting, your trees are getting gnawed, you can put fencing around them, and not chicken wire, folks. You have to put pretty thick fencing around there, but you can put fencing around. The beavers aren't going to be able to climb the fence, so you can either put it directly around the tree or fence off an area that you know, you don't want them there. You could have beaver deceivers in your pond. And again, there is trapping. We have mentioned some of these. Some of the trapping season, I meant to say, for beaver is from January 1st to March 31st and December 1st to December 31st. It is regulated. All trapped beaver must be properly tagged before they're sold, exchanged, given away, or otherwise disposed of. Only, as I said, only North American animal besides us to fell large trees. They can cut over 200 trees in a single year. They secrete a goo that smells like vanilla, castoretum. It's not made into castor oil. It comes, that comes from a vanilla bean, but castoretum is used in perfumes.